philosophy has long been a battlefield where great minds clash. And the ideological confrontation between Friedrich Nietzsche and Immanuel Kant stands as one of its most riveting chapters. At first glance, it may seem curious that Nietzsche, often heralded as the radical and provocative voice of modernity, directed so much disdain toward Kant, the Enlightenment's champion of reason and morality. What could drive Nietzsche, a philosopher renowned for his challenges to traditional norms and conventions, to despise Kant so intensely? The answer lies in their profoundly different visions of human nature, morality, and the potential of the human spirit. Nietzsche saw Kant as more than just another philosopher. To him, Kant embodied everything that was wrong with Western thought, a stifling intellectualism that sought to domesticate life's raw, chaotic potential and confine it within rigid moral and rational systems. In Kant's meticulous frameworks, Nietzsche saw the shadow of Christian morality, the very morality he believed enslaved humanity and suppressed its vitality. Beneath Kant's seemingly secular, rationalist exterior, Nietzsche detected the residue of centuries-old Christian dogma, now dressed in the garb of philosophy. This, for Nietzsche, was unforgivable, a betrayal of the Enlightenment's promise of liberation from dogma. Nietzsche's critique of Kant was often delivered with biting wit and devastating sarcasm. In Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche dismisses Kant's celebrated table of categories as an elaborate but ultimately empty academic exercise, a labyrinth of words that purported to unlock the mysteries of human cognition but, in Nietzsche's eyes, only obscured the truth. To Nietzsche, Kant's philosophy was emblematic of what he considered the worst tendencies in Western thought, a reliance on lifeless abstractions, a compulsion to impose order on the inherently chaotic, and a slavish devotion to duty and universality at the expense of individuality and freedom. But why such visceral hatred? To understand this animosity, we must delve deeper into the philosophical landscapes they occupied. Kant championed duty, moral law, and metaphysical constructs that aimed to order human experience. He sought to build systems that would provide structure and certainty to human life, a noble aim for many, but one that Nietzsche saw as deeply corrosive. For Nietzsche, such systems were chains, restricting the will, suppressing instinct, and stifling the creative force that drives humanity forward. In Nietzsche's eyes, Kant was no liberator but a jailer, offering the illusion of freedom while binding the human spirit with unseen constraints. As we explore their clash, we will delve into Kant's emphasis on duty, morality, and metaphysics, and see how they collide with Nietzsche's radical vision of human flourishing, the will to power, and the embrace of life's uncertainties. This is not just a philosophical discourse, it is a battle for the soul of humanity. By the end, you may find yourself questioning the systems that govern your own life, wondering if they empower you or simply bind you with chains of duty and reason. So, fasten your intellectual seatbelts, because this journey is not for the faint of heart. We are about to step into the arena where two titans of thought collide, each fighting for a very different vision of what it means to be human. Kant's table of categories sought to illuminate how the human mind organizes and interprets sensory experiences, positing that we never perceive the world as it is, but always through the filters of our mind's a priori structures. This concept represented a significant departure from traditional empiricism, as it asserted that knowledge is inherently structured by cognitive categories such as causality, space, time, and relation. In Kant's view, these categories are what make experience possible and intelligible. Nietzsche, however, saw Kant's endeavor as inherently flawed and self-referential. To him, Kant was attempting to provide a supposedly objective map of human cognition, but he was still trapped within the subjective limits of his own perspective. Nietzsche argued that by trying to provide a definitive blueprint of how the mind functions, Kant merely recapitulated philosophical dogma in new terms without offering truly new insights into human experience. This type of reasoning exemplified, to Nietzsche, the worst aspects of rationalist thought, a reliance on intricate but ultimately empty systems that appeared profound but were, in fact, circular and sterile. Nietzsche extended his critique by emphasizing the dangers inherent in the idea that reality could be wholly subsumed by rational categories. He saw this as a way to domesticate and control life's chaotic and unpredictable nature, stripping away its raw, untamed aspects. Imagine trying to reduce the vibrancy of a sunset or the complexity of human passion into neat cognitive categories. Nietzsche believed that life, with all its contradictions and mysteries, resisted such intellectual domestication. This led him to condemn Kantian rationalism as a philosophy of weakness and fear, one that sought to protect humanity from the unpredictable depths of existence rather than confront them. Nietzsche's comparison to Moliere's normative virtue example on this point. Kant's explanation of the mind's workings as a product of faculties seemed, to Nietzsche, like a philosopher's trick, an exercise in complex terminology that failed to provide substantive answers. He saw this as emblematic of a philosophical culture obsessed with creating elaborate theoretical edifices that amounted to little more than self-referential language games. The categorical imperative lies at the heart of Kant's moral philosophy, which holds that an action is morally good only if it is motivated purely by duty, without regard for personal inclinations or consequences. According to Kant, morality is defined by adherence to universal principles that apply equally to all rational beings. This deontological approach to ethics contrasts sharply with consequentialist perspectives, as it emphasizes the moral worth of actions based on the purity of one's intentions. Nietzsche found this moral system profoundly objectionable. To him, it represented a denial of life's true vibrancy and complexity by reducing morality to a rigid system of rules divorced from individual passion and strength. Nietzsche believed that true morality arises from the individual's creative and life-affirming instincts, which he famously encapsulated in his concept of the will to power. Rather than adhering to abstract rules, the moral person, in Nietzsche's view, acts out of a deep engagement with their own values, desires, and creative force. Consider the example of a soldier who unquestioningly follows orders due to a sense of duty, even when those orders conflict with his personal moral compass. To Kant, such a soldier would exemplify moral virtue through his unwavering commitment to duty. Nietzsche, on the other hand, would see this as the suppression of individual conscience and strength, a betrayal of one's humanity. For Nietzsche, the essence of moral action lies not in obedience to external laws, but in the authenticity and courage to live according to one's own values. This made Kantian morality a form of self-imposed servitude, a continuation of the same life-denying asceticism that Nietzsche found in Christian ethics. Nietzsche's critique of Kant's morality also extended to the notion of universalizability, which demands that any moral action be applicable as a universal law. Nietzsche rejected this idea, arguing that it erases individual differences and imposes conformity. Human beings are diverse, complex, and driven by unique desires, ambitions, and contexts. To Nietzsche, a moral system that disregards this individuality in favor of universal duty is a betrayal of life's richness. Nietzsche's claim that Kant was a hidden Christian strikes at the core of his critique of modern Western philosophy. Despite Kant's reputation as a champion of Enlightenment reason and secular thought, Nietzsche argued that his philosophy was, at its core, a reimagined version of Christian theology. Kant's distinction between the phenomenal world, what we perceive, and the noumenal world, the thing in itself, which we can never truly know, mirrored Christian dualism, the separation of this world from a transcendent, unknowable realm. Nietzsche saw this as a betrayal of Enlightenment ideals, which sought to free humanity from religious dogma and superstition, by positing a thing in itself that lies beyond human comprehension. Kant, in Nietzsche's view, reintroduced the concept of a transcendent reality, similar to the Christian kingdom of heaven. This philosophical move, Nietzsche argued, kept humanity chained to the same metaphysical illusions that had dominated Western thought for centuries. To illustrate this point, consider the way Kantian ethics demands obedience to the categorical imperative, a universal moral law detached from personal inclinations or desires. This echoes the Christian emphasis on self-denial and obedience to God's will. While Kant framed this in secular, rational terms, Nietzsche saw it as a continuation of Christian moral values, repackaged for an age of reason. For Nietzsche, true liberation from religious morality required not only the rejection of God, but also the moral and metaphysical structures that had grown out of Christian theology. Nietzsche's disdain for Kant's hidden Christianity was also rooted in his belief that Kant's moral system ultimately undermined human potential and creativity. By demanding adherence to abstract, universal laws, Kant's ethics stifled the individual's drive to create, explore, and assert themselves. Nietzsche viewed this as a form of moral cowardice, a way to escape life's inherent challenges by clinging to the safety of universal rules and dogma. Through these critiques, Nietzsche positioned himself as a radical opponent of Kantian philosophy, rejecting not only its rationalist and moral frameworks, but also its deeper ties to Christian metaphysics. In doing so, he called for a revaluation of all values, a rejection of life-denying moral systems in favor of a philosophy that embraces life's complexities, challenges, and inherent contradictions. Consider a man who faces a moral dilemma. He witnesses a friend committing a minor transgression but is asked about it by authorities. Guided by Kant's categorical imperative, he cannot lie, even if telling the truth would cause significant harm to his friend's life and reputation. For Kant, adherence to duty, telling the truth, trumps all other considerations. The man's morality is rooted in the universality of the law. If everyone lied, trust in human interactions would collapse. Nietzsche would find this example illustrative of Kantian ethics' shortcomings. The man, bound by an abstract, universal duty, suppresses his compassion, personal loyalty, and instinct to protect those he cares for. In Nietzsche's view, this man is a moral automaton, detached from his humanity and real-world context. He acts not out of personal conviction or inner strength, but from an imposed sense of duty that denies his individuality and emotions. In contrast, Nietzsche's ideal moral actor would be guided by a deeply personal sense of integrity and value, perhaps choosing to protect his friend based on his own moral compass, which values loyalty and compassion. Nietzsche argued that morality should not be about suppressing one's instincts in favor of abstract rules, but about embracing and channeling those instincts into life-affirming actions. To follow one's own values requires courage, self-reflection, and authenticity, traits that Nietzsche believed Kantian ethics stifled. Nietzsche's critique here exposes the inherent tension in moral systems that elevate universal duty over individual experience and judgment. In real life, moral decisions are complex, messy, and often involve competing values and emotions. Nietzsche saw Kantian morality as attempting to impose a lifeless, mechanical order on this complexity, ultimately reducing individuals to rule followers devoid of spontaneity and personal integrity. Nietzsche often spoke of Western civilization living in the shadow of God, even as explicit religious faith declined. He believed that moral systems like Kant's carried forward the legacy of Christian ethics, perpetuating the same absolutist, life-denying values under a secular guise. To Nietzsche, Kant's categorical imperative was essentially the Christian, love thy neighbor as thyself, but rephrased in the language of duty and universal rationality. To understand Nietzsche's perspective, consider a scenario where someone donates to charity purely out of a sense of moral obligation rather than genuine compassion or joy. For Kant, this act would be more commendable precisely because it stems from duty rather than personal inclination. Nietzsche found this deeply problematic. He believed that true morality should arise from one's own desires, joy, and creative impulses, not from a cold adherence to universal laws that strip acts of their vitality. Nietzsche's own life serves as a poignant example of his struggle against the lingering influence of Christian morality. Born into a family of pastors, he initially pursued a career in theology, but later rejected his religious upbringing to forge a philosophy that championed life, creativity, and self-overcoming. In Nietzsche's eyes, Kant represented the intellectual continuation of the same moral values he had rejected. By emphasizing duty and moral universality, Kantian ethics mirrored Christianity's demand for self-sacrifice and repression of individual desires. Nietzsche believed that true liberation required not only the rejection of religious belief, but also the dismantling of moral structures rooted in religious values. This was no mere intellectual exercise for him. It was a battle for the soul of humanity. For Nietzsche, Kant's philosophy perpetuated a culture of guilt, repression, and self-denial, even in an ostensibly secular age. True freedom, he argued, lay in breaking free from these moral constraints and embracing life's unpredictable, chaotic nature. Nietzsche's critique of Kant was deeply intertwined with his own existential struggles. Suffering from chronic health problems and social alienation, Nietzsche knew firsthand the suffocating effects of rigid moral and social constraints. For him, philosophy was not an abstract pursuit but a matter of life and death, a means of reclaiming individuality, creativity, and the will to power in the face of adversity. Nietzsche urged individuals to reject externally imposed moralities and create their own values, even if it meant facing suffering and uncertainty. This ethos stands in stark contrast to Kant's vision of a rigid moral order based on duty and universal laws. Where Kant saw morality as a means to impose rational order on human behavior, Nietzsche saw it as an oppressive force that suppressed individuality and vitality. He believed that true morality emerged from within, from the individual's unique desires, experiences, and creative will. Consider a person who chooses to pursue an unconventional path in life, defying societal expectations and moral norms in favor of their own passion and creativity. Nietzsche would celebrate this person as an embodiment of his ideal, someone who rejects external constraints to create their own values and live authentically. For Kant, however, such defiance might be seen as dangerous or even immoral if it conflicted with universal moral laws. Nietzsche's philosophy celebrates the chaotic, unpredictable nature of human life, viewing it as a source of strength and creativity. In contrast, Kant's ethics demand adherence to a rigid moral code that transcends individual desires and contexts. For Nietzsche, this represents a denial of life's true potential, a retreat into sterile moralism that seeks to suppress the very forces that make life meaningful. In Nietzsche's radical call for a revaluation of all values, he sought to overthrow the moral structures that Kant and others had built, replacing them with a philosophy that embraced life's complexities, challenges, and contradictions. To live authentically, Nietzsche believed, was to reject the lifeless moral systems imposed by society and instead create one's own values through a process of self-overcoming and affirmation of life's inherent chaos and beauty. This vision remains one of Nietzsche's most powerful and enduring legacies, a challenge to break free from moral constraints and embrace the full spectrum of human existence. As we come to the end of our exploration, it is clear that Nietzsche's disdain for Kant was more than just a philosophical disagreement. It was a battle over the future of human potential, creativity, and freedom. Kant, the great system builder of the Enlightenment, believed in order, duty, and universal principles as the guiding lights for humanity. He envisioned a moral world where individuals act out of duty to universal laws, thereby creating a structured and rational society. To Kant, morality was an objective endeavor, rooted in reason and detached from the passions and inclinations of the individual. Nietzsche, however, saw this as nothing less than a denial of life itself. To him, Kant's philosophy represented a dangerous attempt to domesticate and control human nature. Life, according to Nietzsche, is inherently chaotic, unpredictable, and driven by instincts, desires, and the will to power. By imposing a rigid moral framework that demanded the suppression of these vital forces, Kant's philosophy, in Nietzsche's view, weakened humanity, reducing individuals to mere moral automatons who obeyed abstract principles without question. Nietzsche's challenge to Kantian ethics was not just a rejection of duty-based morality, but a call for a radical revaluation of all values. He believed that true morality does not come from blind obedience to universal laws, but from the individual's own strength, creativity, and willingness to embrace life's complexities. This is why he celebrated the figure of the Übermensch, the individual who transcends conventional morality and creates their own values through self-overcoming and the affirmation of life's chaos. But Nietzsche's critique did not stop with Kant's moral philosophy. It extended to Kant's metaphysical constructs as well. Kant's distinction between the phenomenal world, what we perceive, and the noumenal world, the thing in itself, which we can never truly know, mirrored. In Nietzsche's eyes, the dualism of Christian theology, the separation of this world from a transcendent, unknowable realm. Nietzsche saw this as a betrayal of the Enlightenment's promise of liberation from religious dogma. By positing an unknowable realm beyond human comprehension, Kant, in Nietzsche's view, reintroduced a form of metaphysical mysticism that kept humanity chained to the same illusions that had dominated Western thought for centuries. So, what can we learn from this clash of titans? At its core, the conflict between Nietzsche and Kant represents a broader tension within philosophy and human life itself. Should we seek universal rules and order, as Kant did, or should we embrace individual freedom and self-creation, as Nietzsche demanded? Are the systems we live by tools for human flourishing, or are they cages that bind us with unseen constraints? Nietzsche's critique remains as relevant today as it was in his time. In a world where moral and philosophical structures often dictate our behavior, he calls on us to question those systems, to live authentically, and to embrace life with all its chaos, complexity, and beauty. It is a challenge to break free from the lifeless moral systems imposed by society and instead create our own values through a process of self-overcoming and the affirmation of life's inherent contradictions. By exploring this intense philosophical rivalry, we see that the battle between Kant and Nietzsche is a mirror for our own struggles with freedom, morality, and the quest for meaning. As Nietzsche might say, the task is not to follow the shadows of past thinkers, but to create our own paths, to dare to live according to our own values, even if it means confronting the great Kantian shadow that still looms over us. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of philosophy's most fascinating rivalries. If you've enjoyed this exploration and want to delve deeper into the ideas of Nietzsche, Kant, and the enduring questions they raise, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Your engagement helps keep these discussions alive and thriving. Until next time, remember, philosophy is not just an academic pursuit, it's a way of life. Live it boldly, question everything, and never stop seeking your own truth.